one. All right, this week on not just the first show of 2022, but a very special episode. We learned earlier that the legendary Sir Sidney Poitier transitioned late last night. We're going to dedicate today's show to him, and we're going to do a tribute to one of the most significant individuals in Hollywood history. Wilson Morales will join us over the course of the next 60 minutes. You're watching Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. All right, and welcome to latest episode, Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. As you can tell, my energy is a little low today. Not a good day in Black film with the passing of Sir Sidney Poitier, who I found out passed away last night at the age of 94 in his home country of the Bahamas. Poitier, who had been dealing with, behind the scenes, had been dealing with some challenges over the last several years. As Wilson Morales and I had talked, and many others I've talked to today, he was 94 years old. We knew it was coming. Still doesn't make it any better to arrive at this day. Wilson, I think I called you. Did I call you with the news this morning, or did you find out, earlier today?
I think you had called me because I was in the midst of doing some other interviews, and I think you called me. At first, I was like, "What does Tim want?" But you called me with the news, and I was like, "Oh, I haven't seen it yet." And so you must have seen it on an outlet earlier that it had not been reported yet by the trades. I guess they wanted to wait to see if they can get any more information and confirmation as opposed to going by what somebody else had written up earlier. And then you just reflect on when's the last time you saw a film? When's the last time you even wrote them? It's around January.
Yeah. I think he has, I'm not really sure. But yeah, it's interesting. So you were saying, what's the last film you've seen by him? Like you were just watching TV and a film came on.
Well, actually what I saw recently of his, Sneakers.
Interesting.
1993, Robert Redford.
Right.
Robert Redford, River Phoenix, and so it plays, it's a commercial film, and that's not just, showing him, that's him later on, and then because when you think about it now, you don't see a lot of his classics played on TV unless TNT plays it.
Or Turner Classic Movies. That's the other place where I watch a lot of his films.
Yes. Turner Classic Movies, and they'll play. If they get a retrospective on him, you'll see 4 or 5 of those movies all at once. So we'll see. We're going to get a lot of talks today. People will be reflecting. I got a chance to be. I wouldn't say I'd never met the guy, but I was at a venue. An event where he was being honored, as we spoke earlier, and that's the closest I've came to. I think I might have even taken a photo of him and Quincy and his daughter. That's as close as I got. But then you start reflecting, like, yeah, this guy, opened the doors for many. When you needed in the 50s and the 60s a Black name, he was it. He was the one that paved the way for Black leading actors.
Yeah, so we talked earlier, and it's funny you said that because I did a couple of hits this morning, and I was telling the story that in May of 2015 I was researching a book, and I called his office to try to set up some time with him, and unbeknownst to me, Sidney Poitier answered the phone, and he and I had a 45-minute conversation where I was expressing to people close to me that I had 3 simultaneous emotions for 45 minutes. I felt like I wanted to cry because of what he meant to me and how I revere him, not just as an actor, but as an individual and a person. I was excited. I wanted to scream. And I was like, man, I just couldn't believe that I actually had my idol on the phone. And, he asked me who I was. I told him what I did. I told him and shared with him how special his work was, not just to me, but to people of color. And he gave me advice that I tried to hold on to this day. And that's the first and only time I ever had a conversation with Sidney Poitier. But I reflect back on that today. And, like you said, Wilson, and Charles has now joined us. Like you said earlier, there's going to be a lot of tributes and people talk about his films. The films to me are secondary to what Sidney Poitier represented, right? Because you think about Jackie Robinson in baseball, Sidney Poitier is literally the Jackie Robinson of contemporary Hollywood, right? So despite the fact that Lincoln Perry and Lena Horne and Paul Robeson and some of those folks had come before, Poitier in 1950 literally was like the first super contract player that was an above the line guy who they knew that we're going to get behind this guy and make him a star. So as you listed the bevy of films from the 1950s, whether it was Black Boy Jungle, No Way Out, which was his debut film, A Man Called Hawk was a movie he made. I think I've seen not necessarily every movie he's made, but probably about 90% of his movies, even the little small B-rolls. I did not see him in Porgy and Bess, which is a film I've never seen, but like an urban legend I've heard about him and Dorothy Dandridge and Sammy Davis Jr. and so many other Brock Peters that were in that movie. But he is a significant figure, man. And the fact that, he's the first Black man to win a Best Actor Oscar. And I think there's only been 3 other people. Am I correct, Wilson, or 4? I think it's been Forrest Whitaker, Jamie Foxx, Denzel Washington, and I may be missing somebody. But it's not a lot of people that have won this award.
Denzel, Forrest, Jamie.
Yeah. So I'm not missing too many people here. So he is significant to me, and I've nicknamed him the Foundation because the basis of all we're watching today with people of color is because of Sidney Poitier, because of him opening the door and having to take the abuse and the roles, and some of them that he didn't necessarily want to do, but he had to do to advance for the cause of what we're watching today. So Charles Kirkland, you're joining us. I'm not going to divulge. It's not a good day for you either, brother. So how you holding up, man? How you hanging in there?
It's been like you said, it's been an interesting day for me the last couple of days, but this was some terrible news that I heard this morning. The same time you called me, it came across on my phone about Sidney's passing, and it was like you say, he's just the icon. If it weren't for, and I don't know if you used your John the Baptist reference as him leading us out of the setting the foreground for whoever was to come behind him. He's just been that important to us as a community, and I'm happy that you got an opportunity to speak to him, but I never did. But it's one of those things that just cross-culturally everyone can say Sidney Poitier was a legend, and how he inspired not just his generation, but every generation that followed after him.
Now, Wilson, I was sharing with Charles this morning, the reference that he just talked about is I said that Sidney Poitier, if you think about it in a biblical reference, he would almost be like the John the Baptist of Hollywood. He was the guy who paved the way and prepared the way for all of what we're watching today. So like I on one of these interviews I did, I said, you think about Will Smith and Denzel Washington and Jamie Foxx and all these huge actors that we see today that are all commonplace. You got to remember, if you go back 60 or 70 years, Sidney Poitier not only was the only Black dude who was starring in movies, a lot of times he was the only Black dude on the set. So there were no other Black people on the set except the one dude who was the star of the movie, and he had to represent everything. So it's like, when you think about Jackie, I keep going back to Jackie Robinson, right? So even as Wilson said, there was some folks who came before, they were doing some stuff in some smaller films that were sort of kind of niche, that they weren't really promoting those films. Those were just some Black fare that they were doing in the 30s and the 40s. But when they made the commitment that they were going to find a black male star, and Sidney Poitier was their choice, and he started making these films, man, the amount of pressure, you think about years later, Spike Lee and Denzel Washington, when they had to tell the story of Malcolm X and the immense pressure. You remember, Wilson, of what Spike was getting in New York, man. You know, he's meeting with Louis Farrakhan. They're Muslims walking around, man. You better not mess up Malcolm's story. So think about being in a career where you're the only, like not necessarily the only black person, because later on Ruby Dee would come and Ossie Davis would come and Brock Peters and Dorothy Dandridge and others, Harry Belafonte and others would star in these movies, but he was first, right? So he was the first one out the gate. He had to comport himself a certain way because, all the hopes of this race are riding on the shoulders of Sidney Poitier. He is the guy. Right. And if he slips up, it may not just mess up his opportunity, but it may mess up opportunities of people behind him. So when people ask me about the significance, which I didn't have enough time to really get into this morning, and I wanted to do it here, that's what I'm talking about when I think about Sidney Poitier, the class that he displayed, the dignity that he's displayed, not just on camera, but off camera. Having to be giving, having to navigate Hollywood. And he was navigating Hollywood in the 50s and 60s. Hollywood is tough now. Imagine how tough it was, Wilson, in the 50s and 60s to be Sidney Poitier. So those are the points that I'm trying to make, man, as it relates to the legacy of this man and why he means so much to people who look like me.
I think
think about the 50s and the 60s, and how tough it is. And I can't recall, you think about the Defiant Ones and, the other movies he had then. And, the roles that he was given, somewhere along the line, I don't know who was behind it. I'm thinking about either the distributor, the producer that said, we're going to make him, because back then they were making stars out of people. It wasn't like nowadays. Back then, if you was on somebody's good list, they were going to bless you. You say, and someone was blessing him, giving him these roles, not just any roles, fearless roles. When you think about In the Heat of the Night, what that film means back then, here comes this cop, and they see, when you see it's been traveling, they've been showing that clip all over Twitter today about, this the best slap you've seen ever in a movie, where the dude slaps her and he gets smacked back and he was like, really? And the cop was looking at him like, Carol O'Connor's like, you look at him giving him like, no, you didn't. And you just think about the roles he's had, and like you said, and I'm sure I have to probably look to see if there's any old interviews that he's done about what kind of situation he was facing in the 50s and the 60s when he was the lead. Did he face anything after he won the Oscar, being the first? We know what Jackie Robinson faced.
Look. Did you see I saw an interview this morning, an old interview he did where he talked about, we talk about the magical year of 1967. You touched on it within the heat of the night. He also did To Sir With Love and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which ironically were all distributed within 6 months of each other, the last 6 months of 1967, right? Sidney Poitier, of course, stars in all three movies. Two of his co-stars in two of the movies, Rod Steiger in The Heat of the Night and Spencer Tracy, who later died like 10 or 11 days after they finished the movie. Both were nominated for Oscars that year. Poitier was not, right? The fact that you talk about In the Heat of the Night, I don't know what accommodations were made, but he told the producers of the film, because he was a Black man married to a woman who wasn't Black, that he did not want to make that movie in the South because he feared for the repercussions that not just for him, but for his family. And I think they accommodated him because he was a star. He was the #1 box office star in 1967. So they were like, whatever you want, Sidney, you got it, right? But Wilson, it came with a price because you know, you got to also remember that the Black Panther Party in a younger, more radical generation was coming up at that time. And they felt that Sidney Poitier could have done more to advance the cause because of who he was and what he represented. And Sidney Poitier had been, what they didn't understand, had been making strides, you know, as a part of the people who not just put his money out there, but also was a mentor to Dr. King, and kind of him, Harry Belafonte, Sammy Davis Jr., Charlton Heston, Marlon Brando, and a bunch of others, you know, participated in the March on Washington in '63. Sidney Poitier, man, was always working for civil rights. He just did it in the way that was comfortable for him, and he wasn't interested in being a follower of other folks. So that's what I meant. And I apologize, Wilson, because as I said, I know you were making a point about some of these performances that he made, but I think about him today, or want to think about him and celebrate him as the man, not as this quote unquote super larger than life figure that Hollywood tried to make him out to be, but his significance simply as a man trying to navigate this thing, and then this huge burden that we all put on him, and rightfully so, because of what he represented. Charles, what were you about to say?
I was going to say, if you want to get some background information, I mean, you talked about interviews with him. There's a wonderful, I'll say a pretty good documentary on Netflix right now called They've Gotta Have Us. And they spent about the whole first episode talking about Sidney Poitier, and, you know, up to his Oscar win, his relationship with Diane Carroll. And well, because at the time they made this is Ava DuVernay's company. Sidney wasn't in the best of health. He wasn't doing much on camera, but Harry Belafonte is there, Diane Carroll are there, so that they can talk about, and they pretty much lay out exactly how hard it was for Sidney just to navigate through this whole thing and have a relationship with, and that's what one of the things that Diane Carroll was talking about, to be just a Black man having a relationship in Hollywood during the time he's trying to be a star, doing what he was doing. So it's a really good documentary to check out if you want to find out more about Sidney Poitier and what he was going through at that time. Because we can talk about it, but there's lots of testimony out there that you can see where you can say, yeah, brother had it hard. Brother had it hard.
I'm looking at an interview I did with Russ Tamblyn last year, you know, about the 60th anniversary of West Side Story. And in the middle of the interview, he was talking about, you know, I said, whatever, any complications on the set. I was like, and I'm going to quote him what he said here. He goes, this is Russ Tamblyn, who's in West Side Story. He goes, I did a movie in Yugoslavia with Sidney Poitier. It's called The Long Shift. And the first day that Sidney came on the set, he was supposed to be the guy who had an army of people. He was the only Black guy in the army. Everyone else was white. And they put them in blackface. When Sidney came on the set, he looked around, he said, where's my army? The producer said, well, here they are. And Sidney goes, why aren't they Black? And the producer says, well, we can't find any Black people in Yugoslavia. And these are the extras that we had to get. Sidney looked at the producer and he said, well, I'll tell you what, you can find all the extras you want in Africa. I'm going back to my dressing room, and call me when you hire them. And all of a sudden, the film stopped. He says, for 5 days, he goes, we got off for a couple of days. I remember that they were trying to bring in some Black actors. I thought that was one of the most beautiful things he ever did. After that, I became such a huge fan of Sidney. He was just a gentleman, you know. So we're talking 1964, you know, and we're talking about how, you know, he was the only Black guy here, only Black guy there. You know, this is how Hollywood was in the 60s. And remember, he was just starting to get his fame in the 50s, you know? So like the thing, by that point, by the time the 60s came along, just by having Russ say that, Sidney started to sense that power that he can do this. You know, they didn't replace him, because who else in 1964 you're gonna get?
Right. Well, they didn't replace him because he was a budding star, and he had literally just won an Oscar earlier that year,
It's like,
Lilies of the
who you
Field.
gonna
So,
get? Well, he don't want to do it. Okay, who else do we got? Not Sammy.
man, I think about another story, Wilson. You told that one about the long ships. 6 years earlier, Otto Preminger and company wanted Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier wanted to do the Defiant Ones, right? And at the time, Dorothy Dandridge had just been nominated for an Oscar in 1954 for Carmen Jones. And the two of them were friends, right? And, what people didn't know behind the scenes is that she had been having an affair with Otto Preminger and it had gone sour. So he was really, it was really uncomfortable for Dorothy Dandridge. So as a part of the deal that they allowed Sidney Poitier to make the Defiant Ones, he had to also do Porgy and Bess, which he thought was really demeaning and not necessarily beneath him, but just something he didn't want to portray and put out there to people, right? But he wanted the Defiant One so bad, and he got nominated for an Oscar for it, so it was really a good choice on his part to star alongside Tony Curtis. So he took it. But when he went to do Porgy and Bess, the relationship between Preminger and Dandridge had gotten so toxic on the set that Poitier had to kind of protect her in the middle of the filming of this story. And again, knowing what we know today about what the content of that film was, how it played a couple of times on television, and then the family or the producers took that thing off the shelf and shelved it forever. So, this is like decades before the Me Too movement and people getting canceled. They knew. Now, Wilson, think about how racist your movie got to be in the 60s for somebody to go, man, we can't show that to people and take it out of circulation in the 1960s, not now. And I think about, to your point, the story of what Poitier did on the set of The Long Ships. Him standing up to producers in 1967, him trying to stand up earlier in the late 1950s, and not just Sidney Poitier, what Dorothy Dandridge is going through. Famously, Harry Belafonte, he made his last film, I forget what it's called, The Flesh and the Devil, and he disappeared for like 10 years. And before he came back in 1970 and started working in Hollywood again. My point is, to all these stories that we're telling, is that, yeah, you can go on any show and they'll tell you, oh, Poitier did this, and he was the first Black dude to have $100 million movie with Stir Crazy, and he did Buck and the Preacher, and you can tell me about all these accomplishments. As I said, my focus is on the man and what the man had to go through, and thank God he did it for us so that we could get, like, everybody we know. Like, Wilson, tons of people working in the business. I know tons of people. Charles knows tons of people. All of them will tell you, if you say the name Sidney Poitier, their face goes blank, and then they have a story of why this man is important to us all, not just to me, to us all, to even Wilson Morales. Wilson, if there's no Sidney Poitier, who Black would you be covering had somebody not come and paved the way for you to have stories that you can write to report on a group of people of color to a group of people of color? Who would you have?
Well, you say that, but I always believe that the void would be filled. Someone would have stepped into that role. They would have picked somebody.
Yeah, they had to pick somebody.
Somebody would have done it. I mean, if it weren't Harry Belafonte or someone else, but we do have Sidney Poitier who did it the best. And so, I mean, we had Betty White that died a week ago, and the world went crazy. This supplants Betty White. This goes, I mean, because everyone knows of our color knows who Sidney Poitier is. My son, who's sitting on his sick bed, sent me a text saying that Sidney Poitier died and was devastated. So, I mean, the void would have been filled, and we may have been talking about somebody different, but the fact of the matter is it was filled by him, and we're talking about him.
So, Wilson, I was watching a clip this morning of, it's funny. 1992, which is now 30 years ago, Sidney Poitier got the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, right? Which I think he might have been one of the first Black people to ever have won that award, right? 10 years later, he got an honorary Oscar the very same night that Denzel Washington won the Oscar for Training Day, right? And I was watching the speech of Denzel Washington, and a little tear came in my eye, because to think about when you're in the room, whether it's the AFI Lifetime Achievement or the Academy Award, the reverence and respect that Sidney Poitier and the love that people had for him, that when they panned around the audience at the Lifetime Achievement Award and you see James Earl Jones and you see Louis Gossett Jr. and you see Denzel Washington and every other significant actor that we respect, how much respect they had for him. You know, listening to Denzel Washington tell stories of following Sidney Poitier around a bookstore like a puppy, trying to get a chance to get his attention, to talk to him, to tell him, I'm gonna be like you, but I respect you and I love you. And what can help me, tell me what it is that I need to do to be great like you, Mr. Poitier. That's Denzel Washington, who we now look at is one of the greatest actors of his generation. And I'm sure Denzel is hurting this morning, just like we're hurting, and just like other members of the Black film community and film community at large are hurting this morning. So Wilson Morales, I say to you as a journalist, because I know you have to not just cover this story, but you're going to be called on to do interviews about this. All I'm saying, man, is, I respect you. You do what you do, but keep that in mind today, that to think about the man, because, you can think about the accomplishments. The accomplishments are there. They're never going to change. He is who he is, but we need to salute him and honor him for a life, I think, that was very well lived.
Yeah, there's not a lot that, I'm going to have to read a lot more about what he did outside of the set, and I'm sure, him and Harry got, you can, when you hear Harry always mentions Sidney, and what they were going through back then. And I'm sure there are some other actors and other names that they did to uplift the community. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure that goes along with that when you become the face. We've seen it happen with today's stars, whether it's LeBron going back to Michael, Tiger, when you're the face, you look at even today's directors, Ava, and sometimes they can embrace it and they know what their status is and how much they have to do and how much they can't do. Like, they can't mess up. That's a lot of pressure. Sometimes you just want to be regular, but that, like, you mess up for everybody else, So that's a lot of pressure that's on him that he had to have seen back then, because it's, at the time, as we all saw, he was the only guy the studios were hiring that they were going to give a lead role to, and if he don't get it, they're not looking for anybody else. It's like, you either got to be the funniest guy in the world, which I don't remember that many Sammy Davis Jr. led films, but Sidney, sir, I'm being out there. It's like, if it ain't Sidney, who else? It's like, it took a while.
Adam, Sammy had some movies, he had some movies in that period.
Then got to go back to the crates in the head and be like, A Man Called Adam, it's like, yeah. And then you look at, obviously, after Sidney, there was the exploitation films, during the 70s, because Sidney was doing those movies and the only other lead actors you saw were in those exploitation films. Then you brought it back to Sidney in some areas. And then really until when is the first time, I'm going to ask you, Tim, when you saw the baton being given over? Can we say it was Denzel first? Or
no, I wouldn't say it was Denzel first. I would say the first guy who I thought was going to take the baton, and it didn't last long, was Howard Rollins, right?
Yeah.
Howard Rollins had come along and done Ragtime, and he had done some other stuff. And
Soldier Story?
Soldier Story.
It's a story too. But it's funny you would say that, because Denzel Washington was in A Soldier Story, and then that baton, when Howard Rollins kind of fizzled, Denzel Washington began to rise. And it's so funny, because I thought Howard Rollins was going to be the next dude, and it was not to be. So
remember, Denzel didn't get that lead role. Because remember, Denzel won the Oscar for supporting actor in '89. You know, he didn't get the lead to what, 90? And that was in a Spike Lee movie, but he didn't start. When did Hollywood started taking notice of Denzel as a lead?
I think Denzel's first major lead, because he had done some smaller stuff. He had done Ricochet. I think The Pelican Brief in '93 was really
No, was that was '93? When was Malcolm X?
Well, Malcolm X, but again, you said so. So let me just take that back. He got his lead in his first quote unquote like Studio 9 Spike movie. That was probably The Pelican Brief, but he had done Malcolm in '92. And he got the Oscar nomination and literally to this day should have won in '92. He had done a bunch of stuff with Spike, you know, Mo Better Blues and some other things he had done. But if you think about his studio stuff, he did Pelican Brief in '93. He did Philadelphia in '94 with Tom Hanks. And then after that, it was off to the races. You know, what was the movie? Him and Gene Hackman, Crimson Tide. And, you know, and then he would expertly balance where he worked with a Ridley Scott or these other major white films, but then he would also come back and Spike would put him to work, or Walter Mosley and stuff like
The Devil in a Blue Dress.
Say it again.
Devil in a Blue Dress.
Devil in a Blue Dress, right. So, you know, I'm an encyclopedia, man. I can't be expected to know all this stuff, but I know a lot of it.
Denzel started hitting his stride, as you would say, early 90s. So we're looking at, you know, when was Sidney's last lead role?
Probably, well, his last thing is probably Sneakers is '89.
No, the last lead role where he stood out.
Well, he did Mandela and the Clerk in '90, '91. And then he did another a sequel to Sir with Love, like sometime in the mid '90s. And I'm trying to think, but I think he officially sort of retired like about maybe 25, 30 years ago. You didn't see, you know, he had put in 40 years worth of work.
He had the 50s, he had the 60s.
He did Buck and the Preacher in the '70s, Uptown. Right. And I was about to talk about that, but go ahead.
Uptown 70, you know. So
let's do it again.
In the '80s, did he have anything in the '80s? No, he directed Stir Crazy.
Stir Crazy in '80, and
he started transitioning to behind the scene, you know, to behind. So I would say like probably '70s, I guess. You know, like the timeline. I don't remember the time. Like
Charles has got this stuff pulled up, I'm assuming.
I was going to say, you know, in the '70s, he stopped working as an actor, and he started doing like small part roles in the '80s. I think he only had a couple movies, like Shoot to Kill, Little Nikita, where he did those things. And when he did Sneakers, he actually said that he was retiring from acting, but he was urged out to do The Jackal.
Right, that's the film with Richard Gere, right?
Yeah.
But he really had retired. He said he wasn't going to do any more acting. So everything after Little Nikita and Sneakers were just little part roles. And so, yeah, I mean, like you said, Wilson, his big starring roles were in the '70s. That's when he last had his own piece.
Well, that was it. Back then, it was like that's when he was being, you know, that's when everybody saw him because he was the guy, you know. And I think he could in a way he kind of saw it like I can step back now because there are other guys coming into the play, you know, they're coming back, you know. And it would take a while before obviously Hollywood would settle on Denzel and be like, this is the guy, you know, this is the guy. I'm sure that you can find other films in the '70s, other actors here and there, but no one has more consistent after Sidney than Denzel. But Sidney was the guy for a long period of time as you go back because, you know, we needed those films, you know, to watch, you know, To Serve with Love, to watch Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, you know, to watch The Defiant Ones where sometimes part of the script was about race.
Right. You know? And that's what he was used for in a lot of these films. It's funny because Wilson was talking, and I remember Wilson and I did a show when Charles was out one day, and we had Richard Wesley on. Remember that, Wilson? Richard Wesley, of course, I tried to get to come on the show, and it couldn't happen today for obvious reasons, right? But he did write a post, which I wanted to share, which I thought was super special. He said he showed a picture of him and Sidney Poitier from like the 1970s. And he said it's one of only two photos I'm aware of where you see Poitier and I together. And yet there are many people who know of how closely we worked together on several projects across 3 different decades. He said, Poitier lifted me up at a most important point in my life and pointed away from me. Every year from 1973 until 2021, we had at least one conversation with each other, usually around his birthday, or I sent a message. We talked about projects. We talked about philosophy, politics, his career, my career, art, the business, and sometimes just silly stuff. He said, the first time I ever traveled outside the US was to his home in the Bahamas on the eve of its independence from British rule. I remember the pride he felt in his hope for the future. His political activism was important to him. His behind the scenes work in the civil rights movement, along with his best friend, Harry Belafonte, the influence of their years-long friendship with the great Paul Robeson. There was so much more I wanted to say, but a lot is clouded by emotion. Sidney Poitier was my employer, my friend, my big brother, at the last, a more unofficial role. I assigned him than he actually sought. He never seemed to mind, and I'm sure I was one of many young men who placed him in that role. Oof. So yeah, man, it's funny because, a couple of months ago, Wilson, when we lost some Melvin Van People, the first person I thought about was Warrington Hudlin, and I called him up, and he was crying like a baby, man, when I got him on the phone. I couldn't even get Richard on the phone this morning because he was the first person I thought about when I got the news of Sidney Poitier. It's interesting to me, man, that, this is my 30th year, Wilson, and I've been telling everybody that I'm going to take the entire 2022 and celebrate 3 decades as a film critic. And along the way, as you know, Wilson, better than others, and Charles is now understanding that this business is based on relationships, man. We meet people, we establish relationships with people, we have people we can pick up the phone and call, people who we know are close to other people, and et cetera, in Hollywood, because again, as people of color, and specifically Black people, we have to stay close to one another in this game, right? So the fact that, we have a day like today where everybody collectively is mourning, and I'm sure when I go on social media later, I'll see tributes from people like Denzel Washington, Oprah Winfrey, and Ava DuVernay, and other long-standing folks who understand, as I am telling the audience today, about the significance, not just of his work, because we're talking about his work, and his work kind of pales in comparison. To Wilson's point, when you get to a certain point in the 70s, man, he starts to slow down because he had put in enough work over the first 20 years in the business that he started looking to produce more, to direct more. And he was smart. And, the fact that I read that dedication from Richard Wesley in the 1970s, here's this Academy Award winning actor who gives this young writer an opportunity. And there's a trilogy of films that are done, even though Wesley only wrote the first 2. So you had Uptown Saturday Night in 74, A Piece of the Action in 75, and then 2 years later, Uptown Saturday Night in 74, Let's Do It Again in 1975, which were both wrote by Richard Wesley. And then they went out and found somebody else to do A Piece of the Action, where they brought James Earl Jones in with Bill Cosby and Richard and Sidney Poitier and Richard Pryor and a bunch of other people. So that, I think, is for Wilson's generation, for my generation of us going to the theater, that's when we started to understand who Sidney Poitier was, as more of I would say more of a relatable person to us, watching him playing these everyman sort of comedies where they're having a lot of fun in the 1970s. Later on, I discover this body of work that takes us back to the 1950s. And that's a different Sidney Poitier for me, because that one was the younger one, the one who's breaking ground, who's primarily the only one. And then the Sidney Poitier we know, later on we see Stir Crazy, and Richard Pryor is given an opportunity, and him and Gene Wilder have this $100 million film with the late, great Cicely Tyson. that to me feels like the more relatable for younger folks of our age range, the more relatable Sidney Poitier. But it's just a slice of an extraordinary career, an extraordinarily groundbreaking career that this man had in what he gave us. So I'm not really sure if there's too much more. You guys, Wilson, you got anything more? Because we got about 10 minutes left.
I got a few minutes left.
And I know you got to dip out. So you about to leave. I got Charles here. So Wilson, I always thank you, man, because like I said, I know you're a busy beaver. We're about to go into ultra lockdown again. So you establish all these Zoom, Wilson, because you're going to need them over the next 3 weeks. I mean, the next 3 months. I'm sorry.
Hopefully 2 weeks. Hopefully this Omicron turns into the Decepticons and gets beaten by the Transformers. No, I'm just.
Wilson told me a story last night. He had a friend of his that was at the Garden when R.J. Barrett led the Knicks back from a 25-point deficit, and he hit the game-winning shot, and the Garden went crazy. And I said, if there was 2 dudes with Omicron in that crowd, y'all in trouble today. I'm just telling you. I'm just saying.
The excitement killed it. And so whatever I was feeling, I'm good now.
Wilson, get on out of here, man, and go handle your business. Wilson got some other interviews to do, but thanks for your time today, bro. I always appreciate it.
Like I said, if there's, before I let you go, let me ask each one of you, if there's one film you had to pull out today to watch, what would it be from Sidney?
No, that's a really good question, man. I literally just saw To Serve with Love about a week and a half ago, and I would watch that again because I loved what he did in that film. But then you also think about A Patch of Blue, where he is playing this noble dude who's got this blind white girl who's in love with him and is trying to get with him. He had some really complicated roles. And Wilson, I would challenge you to go back, because I've had to do this, over the years, and keep rewatching Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, because initially I was really dismissive of this film. And then when I go back and watch it again, that famous line where, his father goes off and is like, I had to carry this bag 75,000 miles, Dad, and he gives him the speech. He goes, Dad, I love you. You see yourself as a colored man. I see myself as a man. Every time he does it, I'm like, oh my God, Sidney, stop it. Woo!
I'll
great movie. Great. And Charles, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charles. Can Charles hear us?
Charles is frozen.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I said, so go ahead. Wilson asked me the one Sidney Poitier movie I would watch. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for me, I'm a big fan of the Defiant Ones. What he did with Tony Curtis, I could watch that all the time. If I'm not doing the trilogy that he did with Bill Cosby in the 70s, I also wanted to point out, Sidney worked from 1950 to 1975. Every year he put out at least one movie from 1950 to 1975. Every year. That is incredible.
It is incredible. And I was going to say, of all of my, all these performances we talk about, I think my favorite performance from him is got to be Raisin in the Sun as Walter Lee. My God, man, that is a masterclass in acting. And that's a case, again, Wilson, that he should have won the Oscar that year, but he would get it for a movie that I'm not going to say necessarily he didn't deserve. I still think Paul Newman in HUD should have beaten Sidney Poitier in 1964. But the Oscar, they gave him the Oscar in 63 for the work he did in 61 in Raisin in the Sun. Mm-hmm. So there you go, Wilson. So I've given you some films to watch. I know you're going to get your Sidney on. And I saw you wonderful group of people assembled last night. Nobody called me. I had to look online to see all my friends in one picture. What's that about, Wilson?
Which one is this?
No, I don't know what movie you guys were doing last night. I just looked online and saw a picture of, there was 5 people in the picture, and 4 of them I know real well, including Wilson Morales, and y'all was somewhere in New York. I'm like, nobody called me. I'm available. What's up?
I don't remember that. You're going to have to tell me that off the record, but that's it for now. I'm out. I got to do work. Tim is up here telling stories, the stuff that we don't remember. But
I'll send you a text later. Talking about I don't remember. All right, Wilson. I appreciate you, bro. Thanks, man. All right. Yeah, Wilson. Yeah, we get on him all the time. So, Charles, we got about 10 minutes to go, man. As I said earlier, we spent the entire show talking about Sidney Poitier, and rightfully so. His passing. We're sad this morning, but we're more sad for us because he lived an extraordinary life and he was 94 years old. And as I told somebody in the interview earlier, I said he squeezed every ounce of talent out of his body in the years that he lived. So when they say leave it all out on the field, Sidney Poitier left it all out on the field for 94 years. And the fact that we have been doing tributes to him for the last 20, 30 years shows just how significant this man has been to us and over how much time he has been significant. But Charles, switching gears a little bit, man, before we get out of here, man. This is the weekend that the Critics' Choice Awards would have taken place in Los Angeles. This is also the week that the Golden Globes were going to make announcements this week on Sunday as well. Sundance was coming up in 2 weeks, and then there are other events that were supposed to have occurred during this award cycle. And the rise of Omicron has literally shut everything down again in Hollywood. So despite the fact that we remain open, Wilson tells stories of people packing Madison Square Garden last night. COVID is very real. So I'm going to leave that to you, whether you have anything you need to say. If you don't, you don't. I'm good with that. But I'm just saying that I'm very aware that we're in a very, what's the word? I don't want to say, I guess challenging is the best way to say it, man. A very challenging cycle that, lucky for us, we spent the week, doing the final vote for the Black Reel Awards, which are coming up on Sunday, February the 27th, which the plan was to do it virtually anyway. So there's no hiccup for us. But we just know that there are several projects that are coming down the road that we would love to plan. And it's difficult to plan anything because we don't know, like right now, as you heard Wilson teasing that, the Omicron, he wants it to go away in 2 weeks because he has a trip to Atlanta. I'm like, dude, Omicron ain't, and even if Omicron goes away, they introduce, what is this new thing now? Fluenza or
no, it's
Flurona?
Flurona, yeah.
The mix of the flu and COVID together. I'm like, dude, it is very interesting. And the fact that Spider-Man came out several weeks ago, Charles, and made $1 billion, gave everybody in Hollywood like, yeah, we back. And I'm like, no, that's the MCU. The MCU is going to make its money. You're not the MCU. And then you've seen Morbius move their date 3 months down the line. And I got a feeling there's going to be some other dates that are going to be getting this shift. With award shows being closed down and people starting to hunker down, Charles, this is a rhetorical question because I know you don't know. What are you anticipating the first quarter of this year from now to March, the end of March?
I would say what I'm anticipating is probably, again, something in the Marvel field. Doctor Strange is coming in that area, but who knows? It might get pushed too, the way things are going. I know Marvel used to have this, we'll do it on our Disney Plus platform, which got exploded by Black Widow. So they've dedicated themselves to doing things back in the theaters, and who knows what we'll be looking like when that time comes around. So hopefully that'll be something that I can get behind and get out and go see. But everything's up in the air again. And I guess that's ironic. I say up in the air again because I felt it here in my household, as you know. We've had an outbreak here. Thank goodness I haven't been affected. It's just something about me. But So we never know where it's going to be. My wife was joking and saying maybe we should all just get it and be done with it. But it's not one of those things that you can only just get one time. You can get it multiple times. So when I pointed that out to her, she was like, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right, because we could get it now and 3 months down the line get it again. So who knows? It's just a crazy time, crazy time." And I'm like Wilson, in about a month, I'm supposed to be headed out of the country and who knows if that's going to happen now. I put some money into this, and it's scary.
All right, man. We got 5 minutes. I got 2 more updates for you, man. Another contributor to our show just sent me a message. They're sick. So I said, "You okay?" And the person wrote back, "I got the flu. It's not COVID." And I went, a sentence I never thought I'd write. That's good, I guess. Is that good that you got the flu? All right, so that's update number 1, Charles. Again, never thought I'd write that sentence. Robert Townsend has a tweet that just went out. It said, "The first king has died. I will miss the cinematic giant, but I will miss the generous and kind man even more. My prayers are with him, or prayers are with his family. May God watch over you. Long live the king." Robert Townsend, talking about the death of trailblazer Sidney Poitier. The word I keep using in every interview I've done, whether it's here at WTOP, locally in Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia, where I did interviews this morning, significant is the word. Sidney Poitier's contribution is significant.
And Robert Townsend being a trailblazer in his own right, giving it up for the guy who did it for him. So,
yeah, man. So like I said, Charles, I'm not surprised. I just know all day long they're going to be tributes, and rightfully so. The thing that's going to really burn my britches, man, is that Turner Classic Movies, which literally has a limited library of Poitier films. And the reason why I say it's a limited library is every time I'm like, Martin Luther King birthday, they're like, "We're doing Sidney Poitier movies." I'm like, okay, let's see. Close my eyes. Let's see. To Serve with Love, The Heated Night. Guess it's going it's the same set of movies. And I really wish somebody would find, Blackboard Jungle is one that they don't play a lot, but I've seen it several times. The Edge of the City with him and John Cassavetes and Ruby Dee in 1957. That's another good one. Please, somebody run Raisin in the Sun. Gotta watch that movie again. And it would be cool to see, well, actually, I'm not going to broadcast it, but Charles, I'll send you if you need to see Let's Do It Again and in Uptown Saturday Night. We can send you those. But please, somebody run those movies so that we can see the genius of this man.
How about A Warm December?
Well, that'll be a part of the special, in A Warm December. And what's the other one he did with Abby Lincoln, which is really funny, where he played the businessman and they tried to set him up with the maid so that she was trying to leave. And they was like, "If we find you a boyfriend, you can stay here. It's not."
Oh, yeah.
What is that one called? The Warm December is the one he did with, oh God, what's her name? The former Miss Jamaica, something Anderson. I can't remember her name, but the one he did with Abby Lincoln. Let me look that up because we got to have that title, because you definitely. What is it called?
Esther Anderson.
Esther Anderson is in A Warm December.
But I'm trying. Was it?
Wait a minute. Oh, For the Love of Ivy, because I was humming the song.
For the Love of Ivy, yes.
Shirley Horn. What Ivy wants. What Ivy. Oh, I love that movie, man. So those are the movies that I'm hoping somebody will play today. Charles, we got to get out of here, man. But it's our first show of the year. Happy New Year to you, which we didn't say. Prayers for you and your family. And you know I'm saying it publicly. I've said it to you privately. If there's anything you need from me as you get through this, because I've been through that, bro. And I'm telling you, it is not fun with the long-term stuff that one has to deal with. and that sort of that kind of virus that is moving around right now. But I keep using the word that it's going to be a challenging couple of months, man. And thank God we have this platform that over that time we will be able to explore, and we'll talk about. All we can do, man, is follow the news, man, and report what's there, bruh. So I look forward to a year, God willing, another year of us doing this show. And I'm going to put this episode to bed, bruh. You take care of yourself. Call me if you need me for anything, man. And we were going to talk about the 355. Nah, we're not going to do that today. Until next week, as I tell you guys all the time, please see something good at the movies. We're giving you some recommendations of the late, great Sir Sidney Poitier, the man I call the foundation, who we all stand on this man's shoulders. Until next week, Charles, any final words for you, bro?
No, brother, stay safe. Keep your masks on. Get your booster shots. That's all I got to say.
All right, man. You take care, bro, and we will talk. And you guys, we'll see you guys on the other side. You guys enjoy your weekend. Take care.